Getting started into the saltwater aquarium hobby can be an extremely daunting task. But in this video, I'm going to give you my top 10 essential tips for saltwater aquarium beginners that are going to help you get kicked off on the right foot. I've been keeping reef tanks for the better part of 25 years, and I have read and scrolled thousands of pages of information researching things to do. And this is my first tip. Research and planning. You really need to try to understand some of the unique challenges of a saltwater aquarium before you ever get your first tank, before you ever purchase the first thing. Immerse yourself in the hobby. Begin reading and begin learning about it. And there is a way to do research. And one of the things that drives me absolutely nuts is in social media groups and in certain places, and even when you talk to people, they will tell you, do your research, or you need to do more research, but they don't tell you anything more than that, and it drives me crazy. So let me give you a few little hints about how to do research in this hobby. Join some reef keeping groups. There are some forums online like Reef to Reef. Reef Central has some good ones, and these are groups that have been around for the better part of 15 or 20 years. There's a ton of information in these groups, and there's some Facebook groups and stuff as well. So what you need to do, instead of looking for specific things, just go into the group and go to new posts, or if you're in the forums or whatever, go to new threads and just start reading what other people are talking about. You don't have to try to digest all of it. You don't have to try to understand everything that they're talking about. Just start reading some of what they're saying. And after a while, after a couple months of just reading this person's experience and that person's experience, you're going to start picking up on some of this stuff. You're going to start understanding what things mean, and you're going to start seeing patterns of answers from repetitious questions that people are asking. This happens especially often in like Facebook groups. We see the same types of questions every day, every other day. People will come in and ask, what's the best type of test kit? What you don't want to do is jump to the first answer and believe that that is the absolute answer, that is the gold standard, that's what we have to do. Take some time to read through several of these posts. If you read through a post where somebody says something like, what's the best test kit to use for saltwater aquaria? What you're probably going to see is people jump down in the comments, and some people are going to say API, some people are going to say Salifert, some will say Red Sea, some will say Hannah. Go through these posts and look for the patterns of what people are saying. That particular instance, you're going to find a pattern where people are saying that API tests are not that great. Salifert and Red Sea are pretty commonly well used. Hannah are pretty nice, but they're really expensive. But you won't know that if you just take the very first post you see and run with that answer. So you have to sort of look for the patterns, pick and choose, skim read these various posts, and it's going to start giving you that understanding of what's involved in this hobby. Essential tip number 2 is going to be investing in quality equipment where it matters. Now, I am not the type of person who will go out there and tell you that you have to buy the most expensive stuff or you're not going to succeed in reef keeping. Quite the contrary. I use a lot of equipment from Amazon with my aquariums, my lights, and my flow pumps and stuff like that. They're all from Amazon. You do not have to go out there and spend. If I put Radion G6s over this tank, it would be $4,000 in lighting. I simply can't do that. But where I didn't go with Amazon stuff, or if it did come from Amazon, I made sure that it was a name brand, was my heater controller, and my automatic top off. Those 3 things are fish and tank killers. If your heater fails either off or on, it can kill your tank. If your heater controller fails, turning your heater off or on constantly, it can kill your tank. Using a heater controller with a heater is another top tip, but that's one for another video. Anyway, I digress. My point is spend the good money on the stuff that needs to be consistent, or it can unalive your tank. If you put a Haiger gyre flow pump in your tank like this, and for some reason a year from now that thing stops working, your tank is not going to die. But you got a year's worth of use out of a $70 or $80 pump versus a $300 max spec gyre set like I have in here as well. And honestly, I like the Higer a little bit better just because of the way it works. But my point is, if one of these pumps goes out, my tank is not going to die overnight. If one of these lights fail, my tank isn't going to die overnight. But if my heater explodes in the sump, there's a good chance some things are going to get killed from that action having taken place. So pick and choose where to spend the money on the good stuff, and you can budget for the rest. Tip number 3 is selecting the proper tank size for your skill set and the space that you have to put a tank in. I would not recommend somebody run out there and try to do like a 200 or a 250 gallon tank right off the rip. It's going to be very expensive. You're probably going to make some very costly mistakes, and it's just a much harder situation for somebody to get through as a beginner. But with that said, the opposite end of the spectrum, going with a very small tank right off the rip, is also not a great option. Bigger tanks are much more forgiving with the fluctuations in water parameters and temperature and things like that. Smaller tanks are much harder to maintain because things can change so much faster. You can think of it this way. If somebody peed in your bathtub, that's going to be a much more concentrated situation than if that same somebody peed in a swimming pool. You know what I mean? Now, in neither case do we want anybody peeing in either one of those situations, but I guess it does happen sometimes. We're off track. Anyway, back on track. Find a middle ground, something like a 40 breeder or a 60 breeder. I really don't like the footprint of a 55-gallon aquarium, but as far as volume goes, it's a good size to start with. I wouldn't recommend that anybody start with anything less than a 20. That's my absolute minimum for somebody getting started. And it's still even a little small. I think 30 would be, kind of the sweet spot, up to about 75. That sort of range, you can get into the hobby for $1,500 to $2,000 now in 2025. And it's going to be enough of a system for you to decide whether you're going to like this or not, because you might not even like saltwater aquaria once you get into it and find out everything that's involved. Along with that are some structural concerns that you need to keep in mind. If you live in something like a mobile home or a raised frame house or a house up on, piers and beams, you might have to reduce your footprint of your aquarium just a little bit so that you don't compromise the structural integrity of the home that you live in. That's just one of those things that people don't often think about, maybe until it's too late. Tip number 4, we're going to talk about understanding the nitrogen cycle. And now, you guys have been watching me for a while know that I harp on the nitrogen cycle a lot. This is not a full tutorial on the nitrogen cycle. You don't have to leave the video. What I mean is you do need to understand the nitrogen cycle. It is not just putting water in the aquarium and getting everything running and letting it run for a couple of weeks. There's more involved than that. There's biochemistry at play that you need to have a handle on, because it is the first thing that's going to happen to your aquarium, and you need to do this to make sure that the aquarium is safe for the animals that you're going to be putting into it. I have a video on the nitrogen cycle that explains it in detail, and I'll link it at the end of this one. Tip number 5 is going to be quarantining new arrivals. So many beginning aquarists just skip the whole quarantine setup, either because they don't know they should or because it seems like a whole lot of work. And it's really not. I have a video on that. I just released it a few days ago. Go back and look at it in my playlist. It's really not that difficult of a thing to do, and it could absolutely save your entire tank from some sort of wicked pathogen that you don't want in there. It's only going to take one time of adding something to your aquarium that has ick or velvet or Brooklynella or Uranema or something like that on it, and it could cost you your entire tank. And potentially that could mean several $1,000s for some people, depending on the fish and the corals that you choose. Taking a few weeks to quarantine your animals in a plain Jane quarantine setup like I'm showing you right now is one of the best things that you can do. Yes, it's going to require you to learn another skill set, and it's going to add some complexity to what you're doing, but it could save your whole tank. And here's a pro tip: you really should have your quarantine set up at least 10 feet away from your main display. There's been research that has shown that some of these bad things that we don't want can actually travel through the air in water droplets and go tank to tank in aerosolized water. It's kind of crazy to think about it. So keep that QT round the corner or in another room. Essential tip number 6 is going to be to test and track your... Hang on, that was my dog. All right, where were we? Oh yeah, test and track your aquarium at least weekly on your water parameters. And the reason that I say track your aquarium is because if you have something that goes on with the tank, let's just say your corals start looking poor and you really don't know what's going on. So you can go back to your log and you can look back at the history of your water tests and you can see if anything changed. Believe me, after 25 years in the hobby, even I don't have the ability to see a trend in water changes over the last 6 months unless I have something to look at. I can't remember what my alkalinity was 6 months ago, but if it was 12 and now it's 8, there's something going on with the tank that I need to get sorted out. Now, that's an extreme example, but it illustrates the point. Tracking is one of the best things that you can do for your aquarium. And these days, we have mobile apps that you can get. Aquatic Log is one of the best ones. Reef Bay is another one. No affiliation to either one of those. I use them and I like them, and they are good things to have to track your water parameters with. And they will show you a graph over time of what your water parameters are doing. Not testing and not tracking is an absolute mistake. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't want you to obsess over the numbers. I just want you to have a history of what the tank has been doing over the last several months. Just in case anything goes crazy, you can look at it. This is sort of like tip 6.1, right? Testing and tracking your water parameters is also going to make sure that you're putting your eyes on that tank at least once a week. We get busy in life. The tank is looking good over in the corner. It's running. You feed the fish every now and then. Everything is good. Keeping that routine is going to establish some consistency in your aquarium, and that is just going to help you in the long run be more successful over time. Tip number 7, we're going to want to start our aquarium with some hardy species of animals. You don't want to go out there and get a purple tang as your first fish. As tempting as that may be, that would be a mistake. Oftentimes in saltwater aquaria, you see clownfish listed as the very first fish that you might want to put in your aquarium, and a lot of people do. I mean, come on, we all like clownfish, right? But the reason that people recommend clownfish is because they're freaking tough, man. They're relatively hardcore as far as a little fish goes. Some other options might not be quite so hardcore. Let's just take one. A copper band butterfly, for example. They're often found at these fish stores and animal places like Petco and PetSmart, but they're not a good fish for a beginner. That fish is considered expert only, and they're beautiful, and they're not that expensive either. So the allure is there for a beginner to take that fish home, but it would be a mistake. So make sure when you're doing that research part, you start typing in some threads and some looking for places about what are good starter fish for saltwater aquariums. Another thing that you want to make sure you're doing in this same sort of mind frame is checking compatibility between species, because everything doesn't get along with everything, and you can easily make a mistake when you're at the fish store and you see this beautiful fish, and next week you're at a different fish store and you see this other beautiful fish. But what you don't realize is that that one is food for that one. So you want to make sure that you're checking compatibility before you purchase your animals and take them home. There are compatibility charts that you can find online. I'll link one down in the description below, and it's a very generalized guideline about what fish get along with what other fish. And it's a really good resource. Now, one of the harder ones to make sure that your compatibility is good with are your invertebrates. There are certain crabs and certain snails and things that you can't put with other crabs and other snails, either because they are predator or prey on those items. So when you find something in a store, you need to talk to the people about it, but don't just say, hey, can I keep that with my clownfish? Make sure you're telling them that I've got this kind of snail and I've got some hermits and I've got an emerald crab, I've got a tiger conch. Can I keep this fighting conch in the tank with my tiger conch? No, you're not going to want to do that. I spoke on this a little bit already, but it is essential tip number 8. You want to keep a consistent maintenance schedule with your aquarium, even to the point of actually scheduling the stuff that you're going to be doing with your tank. Put it in your calendar that every Saturday morning you're going to get up and you're going to clean the glass and you're going to prep and do a water change and you're going to run your aquarium tests and log your parameters. If you're running a canister filter, maybe you want to add complete disassembly and cleaning and checking of the medias in your canister filter to that weekly maintenance schedule. The possibilities are endless. It really depends on your setup and what you do. With mine, it's a water change. I take out and change my filter socks. I clean my skimmer and I check over all my pumps to make sure that everything's running properly. That's just my weekly sort of eyes on the tank and checking to make sure things are good. Yours is probably going to look different than mine and probably different than most other people's. But the point is, keeping that schedule is going to maintain consistency with your aquarium and it's going to help push you towards being successful. Tip number 9, be patient and avoid overcrowding your aquarium. Putting too many things in a brand new tank right off the rip, or even putting too many things into a tank even as it ages, is a mistake that people often get caught up into. It's so easy. Once that aquarium is nitrogen cycled and you go to the fish store and you're like looking at everything in the store and they're like, give me those clownfish, I'm going to take those. And then you get a cleaner shrimp and then you get 6 turbo snails. And then the store guy's like, man, did you see this coral we got over here? And it just spirals out of control. And before you know it, you've spent $400 and your wife's mad. Don't ask me how I know. Well, my wife is amazing. She doesn't get mad at me, stuff like that. She might look at me a little sideways, though. Point is, you want to introduce your livestock gradually over time. And this is something I think I'm going to make a whole different video on because people don't talk about this enough. People like to say, just go slow. My preference for what I'm going to start telling people going forward is go steady. You want to continually be adding things to your aquarium once a week, once every 2 weeks, 3 weeks, once a month, but keep a sort of a schedule with that too. You don't want to add a bunch of stuff, wait 3 months, don't make any changes, add a bunch of stuff. What you want to do with a new tank as it matures is add a little bit of bio load every now and then over time. Every once a week or every 2 weeks, like I said, go to the store, get a few snails, get a few hermit crabs. It doesn't have to be a lot of stuff, but add a few things. This is going to do multiple different things for your aquarium, not the least of which is increase the diversity of not only the aquarium inhabitants, but also the bacteria and things that you're bringing in from these other tanks. You're getting hermit crabs from Fiji, which don't have any Fiji left on them by the time they get here, but it illustrates the point. And you're also getting some from the Caribbean, for example. And you might add a fish from Hawaii if they ever open imports and exports back up. And then you might add a fish from the Caribbean and one from Indonesia. And introducing all of this different bacteria to the tank and things is going to increase your biodiversity. And we have seen time and time again that doing that is one of the greatest things you can do for your aquarium. A biodiverse aquarium is going to be much more successful than a diversity limited one. But you need to understand that successful aquariums take time to mature, and it's just not something you can get around. Some people can do it if they have enough experience in the hobby, and they can pack a tank full of corals and fish off the rip, and they can maintenance it and monitor it, and it will succeed. But for most people, if you're just getting into the hobby, I wouldn't recommend doing that. Take your time, go steady, and you'll find success in the end. My 10th essential tip for you is going to be one that isn't going to directly affect your aquarium. More so, it's going to directly affect you as a reef keeper yourself. Join some reef keeping communities, whether that be Facebook groups or online forums, or some people even do Snapchat or Instagram or whatever. And it's not limited to social media either. there are a ton of local groups all over the place, and people might meet up on the weekends, or they do, tour of tanks where you go around to different people's houses, you look at their tanks and talk to them about their setups. My point is, get into some community somewhere with some people that are like-minded, they enjoy the hobby, and share the ideas and thoughts that you have back and forth. You can ask these people questions, they will give you answers, especially the people who have been doing it a really long time. We love nothing more than to show off our tanks and tell you the crap that we've been through to get where we are. I would absolutely love it for you to join my community on Facebook. It's called Reef Rookies with Logan. We don't tolerate any kind of crap over there or bashing of beginners for asking simple questions. You get one shot in my group, and if you violate that, you're gone. You won't get that experience in some of the other groups, but there are a lot of other places with very experienced reef keepers that have great knowledge about the hobby and are very willing to share it. My point to all of that is find a community that you jive with, and then just be a member of that community. Even if you don't have a tank yet, even if you're just getting into the hobby, join a community. Ask questions. If you see somebody make a post that says, hey, I tested my phosphate and it's XYZ, jump in the comments and go, I'm brand new and I'm trying to learn. Why is this a problem? And then let them tell you why they think this phosphate thing is a problem for them. You're going to learn so much more by interacting with the community than you ever will just trying to go at it alone. Something else you can do as far as the community goes is look up big reef keeping events. And it doesn't have to just be for reef keepers. You can, fish only people are invited too. We love you guys just as much. But things like Aquashella and Reefapalooza, we have one local down here by me called Aquafest every year. And even my local group puts on a crawfish boil every year, and we all get together and we have crawfish and we discuss reef tanks, and it just happens to be at the Coral View headquarters, which is absolutely cool. We get to walk the warehouse and all that. But my point here is find some people. People enjoy engaging with other people in a respectful way, and some people enjoy being disrespectful. We don't like those people. And there you have it. Those are my 10 most essential tips for somebody getting started and continuing to grow in the saltwater aquarium hobby. If you've made it all the way to the end of the video, drop hashtag to the end down in the comments. And if it's your first time here, be sure to subscribe to the channel so you can find more videos like this when I release them in the future.